Video games can entertain you, but video games can also get you through some rough times. Let's talk. Hello humans, and welcome to another episode of Gen X Gamer. Guys, when I started this channel, I wanted to talk not only about the stories that I had with video games, the good times, but how video games also got me through some tough times. You know, and I've had the kind of life. I've been a working person all my life. I didn't get education until, later on in life. So before that, I was really struggling, and a lot of the times I was able to get through the toughest of times through video games. That was my therapy. Back then, there was no counseling. There was no there was no therapy groups, right? There was any of this stuff. There's no depression. You start talking about, in my family, if I go, to one of my uncles again, Uncle, I'm having a tough time with life, in general. He'd be looking at me like, what the hell's wrong with you? You just drink some tequila. Let's go get drunk, have some booze. We'll work it out, whatever. That was about the extent of therapy that you got, right? And there was really none of that mental health stuff. And guys, I didn't know any of that stuff. That was just my life. I thought just that's the way life was, right? The life of a working man, you're supposed to do things, and I still believe that. Life is tough for men, and that's why daddies are daddies, right? We're supposed to take on the roles, do the tough things, and feed our families however we can, right? So this was the case for me, and I was all of 21 years old, okay? And I already had a daughter. And this was in 1989, 1990, and the economy here in California wasn't too great, and I wasn't able to find a job close to where we lived. So I had to drive an hour to work at a shoe store, right? And I worked that during the day, and then eventually I was able to get another job, which was out in the docks, right, in Long Beach. So I would drive an hour and 13 minutes without traffic, okay? This is without traffic. If I had no traffic, it would take me about an hour 13, an hour and a half, around there, to get to work. If there was traffic, it could be longer. It could be an hour 45. So I always left early, got there early so maybe I can eat something, and I was just selling shoes at a mall. And then after that, I would get out. I was eventually able to get a part-time job at the docks. So I would leave there, right? Drive like 42 minutes right after work. I would, close up at 10, and I started my shift at the docks about 11:30 until the next morning, and then I would try to schedule it so I wouldn't have to work the next day, and I could, get some rest, because at that point it was a 12-hour shift at the docks and an 8-hour shift at the mall, right? So for that period of time, I was working 20 hours, and let me tell you, by the time I would get home, I would be just so blitz tired, guys, because the work I did at the docks was hard labor, man. It was forklifts, pallets, sandbags, working, offloading vessels, that type of stuff. It wasn't easy, it wasn't easy work. It was very tough work, but it paid well. And I really wanted to get out on my own because we had just come back to California, and we were staying at my in-laws' house, and I didn't want to stay there too long. I wanted to move out, so I wanted to save some money in order to do that. That's why I was getting these two jobs. So guys, I would come back, and depending, sometimes I would work in the docks in the morning and then work at the shoe store at night. And then by the time sometimes I would get home, it would be too late. I couldn't have dinner because everybody was asleep. I didn't want to wake anybody up, especially the baby, so my dinner would be stopping by 7-Eleven and getting a burrito. I remember the red hot chili burritos that you used to sell at 7-Eleven, the long ones, right? And I used to get a bottle of Yoo-Hoo, chocolate Yoo-Hoo, and then, guys, I would play this game. I remember this whole season that I was doing this. It was this game that got me through with that. I would look forward to this game, and my toughest days were, dealing with people isn't easy, especially when you're selling shoes and that type of environment. And then at the docks, my boss was an a-hole, guys. An a-hole. I mean, the type of person that you just want to punch on the daily. On the daily. This guy was just a narcissistic a-hole, right? And just, it took every single bit of my self-control and just thinking about my paycheck of, why I should knock this guy out every time I go to work, right? Because this guy, we were doing backbreaking work. He wouldn't do any of it, okay? We're showing up in jeans, sweatpants, shoes. It's cold out there. We're busting sandbags, driving forklift, and this guy's behind us. Go, 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 hurry up. I don't want to be paying any overtime. The whole time. Right? It was just a pain in the ass job. Anyway, the one good thing is, we would get to drink at lunchtime. I would just, have a beer or something. Some of my friends would get lit up. They would go hotboxing containers. But anyway, guys, on the way back home, there'd be some days, man, that's all I would be looking forward to. The final blow, playing that game, it'd be the last thing that I do before I just got home and just went right straight to bed, right? Because when you get out of work, even if you're tired, you're all wound up, but I couldn't do that because, I'm staying at somebody else's house. And then the baby can wake up at any time, so I'm trying to be like super, super, quiet and stuff. And let me tell you guys, I did that for about 4 or 5 months, and it sucked. It sucked so bad. But the one thing I remember, guys, is finally getting to that 7-Eleven thinking, okay, I finally made it. Right? I'm going to get some rest. And the last thing I would do is I would get that burrito. I would get that Yoo-hoo. Man, and I'd play Final Blow, man. And what a great game. What a great game, man. I love boxing games, guys. I always have. They've always been part of my gaming history. And I like the sound effects of the game. The graphics look so next level to me. It's all about arcades, and I look at this game not only with nostalgia but with melancholy, because I was, I guess people now would call it depressed because I knew there wasn't anything I could do, right? There wasn't anything I could do about my situation. All I could do is work my ass off, put up with this a-hole so I can get out of there, get our own apartment, which I eventually did, right? And then at that point I thought, man, it was all worth it, to have our own apartment, to have our own space. It was great, man. It really was. But, that time will always remind me of the final blow. And it was the one bright spot during that whole screwed up time where I had to, work 20-hour days. It was the one bright spot in my whole day, and that's pretty much been a lot of my gaming experience. I know, people here on YouTube, always talk about great experiences and my mom gave me this and this and that. Well, sometimes life isn't that way, man. Life isn't that way. And for me, video games a lot of times have been my therapy, have been my motivation, have been that disconnect that I would have at the end of the day where I really want to think about all the crap that I had to deal with, right? The bad situation that I was in, the lack of money, we got to pay these bills, we got to do that. Video games has always been there for me. And the final blow, man, let me tell you, this game got me through some tough times because mentally sometimes I was burnt. I couldn't handle it. I couldn't see, the next day. I couldn't see light at the end of the tunnel some days. And sometimes I knew it was just I had to put my head down and grind. And the final blow was the highlight of my day. To this day, man, I have a special place in my heart for this game. And whenever I think I'm having a bad day, let me tell you, I look back on those days. I ain't got shit to worry about, man. I'm living the dream now. All right, humans, I will catch you on the next one. Take care.